Crazy great job, you guys. I don't know, Tony, how you squeezed in 17 years of terror and like this whole thing into this film. Like, I know you took parts of it, but it's like it's a long story to tell.
It was that was definitely probably the biggest challenge, is how to kind of condense it all into the essence of Ted. But in a way, it's just we had so much incredible material, and we did shoot long. We created a 4-hour cut, and then we cut down to this 2 hours to kind of just sort of make it experiential, but also know the story. So it was kind of a fine line, and that's where we ended up, and kind of struck a balance.
Mr. Copley, how did you look at the interview or read the manifesto before you took on this part?
Yes, absolutely. The first part was reading the manifesto, which is the thing that made me sort of open to doing the movie. I didn't really want to do it before that. I thought he was just I knew very little of him, and it was just like, oh, there's a psychopathic serial killer, Ted Kaczynski, and I was like, okay, don't really want to do that. But once I read the script, read the manifesto, and then what really sealed it for me was listening to him speak. There's that audio interview where he talks on YouTube. And that is just totally different to any portrayal of him that I'd seen before. His energy level, his cadence, the way he speaks, the kind of personality, the kind of humor he has, the passion he has for what he's talking about. I just hadn't seen that portrayed in any version of him before. And so that really intrigued me, and I related to it. I could sort of somewhat, obviously closely enough mimic his voice and stuff and his way of speaking, that it impressed Tony. And yeah, we just sort of went on the journey from there. It was an incredible experience.
It almost seems like you ran a marathon making this film. And your voice, by the way, gives this guy an award. I mean, how you kept it going throughout, this voice that you made.
Yeah, and it was one of those decisions. When I was talking to the dialect coach, I worked with like one of the top guys, and there was this discussion about, well, could you do this voice? And also talking to Tony about his actual voice it's not particularly pleasant. It's not the normal deep registered cool guy voice that you'd use, especially for a villain. And so that in itself was quite a ballsy decision to just say, oh, we're just going to go for it. We're just going to try and do it as authentically as we can. And sort of that's the function of the movie in a way, is just try and express what we perceive of the guy, which is very difficult to do, as Tony says, in 2 hours.
Hey, for both you guys, before starting this project, did you really, really know everything about Ted Kaczynski? It's the #1 manhunt in U.S. history, by the way, the #1 and the most expensive and the most terrorizing. I mean, even the other day when I got a package that I got, and it was a weird package, I was like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to throw it first, and that was even before I knew I was going to do the interviews. Yes, I'm like, I still think about the package thing.
Yeah.
So did you guys really know? I mean, like the extent of what you guys were making?
Tony had more of a sense, a lot more of a sense, because he can speak to that. I mean, he's been researching Ted for years. I knew very little. I was growing up in South Africa at the time. It didn't really affect us. It was a news story. When I heard the name Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, I was like, oh, I thought he's one of those guys who blew up a building or something. I didn't realize that he was a sort of an extremist eco-terrorist. He'd been portrayed as mad. My experience of him, so no, I knew nothing. Relatively, and as we went, almost like till the last day, we were discovering new things. We discovered, because we met people in Montana that knew him. We shot on the exact land. We put his cabin back exactly where his cabin was. Some of his stuff was still there. His old pipe to water the garden, his veggie garden structure, his bike shed, his storage cellar that he'd built underground. It was amazing. There was some old chemicals that the FBI had left behind and hadn't taken. There was an amazing number of old cans and stuff from tinned food that he'd eaten. So yeah, we just learned. I just learned more and more and more. I learned how he did it. You know.
So you guys save money on props.
We definitely did. The only structure that wasn't on his land was the cabin. And I had actually built it a few years before and built it so it could be taken apart and shipped to Montana. And I built it in upstate New York. And, that was the one thing we drove out. But basically, all his structures were still there. And we used a lot of those as sets, obviously,
Okay, Tony, I want to know this. How do you convince Mr. Copley to do this? How do you convince him to like, look, it's about this guy. He's this eco crazy killer. He's super smart. How do you convince him? How'd that go? Like,
I don't know. It was, we just, Sharlto, I think there was another script that had gone around where,
Right.
where there was another FBI focused story
Yes.
on Ted, where I think Sharlto was going to play an FBI agent. And so he had become aware of the topic because of that. And then this script came in a few months later, and then suddenly Sharlto realized there was so much more. But but without that first script, Sharlto might not have even known the topic that well. So Sharlto just dove in and just did an incredible first take with his audition tape. That was just it was just so clear cut. I had seen a bunch of stuff and been waiting for the right actor for a few years, and I was like, oh my god, where has Sharlto been this whole time? And we just had like a 2-hour conversation over Skype. That was probably the worst connection ever. But and anytime you're dealing with Ted Kaczynski, I swear you have technological failures. But we just connected.
Yeah, every time we spoke, there's something would go wrong with the technology in the lead up. We were just like, what the hell is going on here?
That was Ted. That was Ted.
And they're like, we have to do this. I mean, this is a sign from the techno gods that we got to make this happen. So,
okay, here's my last question. Does Ted have a point about all this in a way? About us kind of ruining the planet and like slowing down the way we get technology?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at a movie like Don't Look Up, being as successful as it is right now, like no one a couple of years ago would have thought you could make a movie in Hollywood where the message of the movie is basically we're screwed, we're totally idiots, and we're total idiots as a collective society, and we're going to go down. That's Don't Look Up, and it's a massive film, from an audience point of view. People know, we know that like this can't be right. Like our suicide rate is massively high. Our kids are being brainwashed by like too much screen time and media. We know this, like some fundamental part of us, but obviously not. Nobody's doing anything about it. So he's a guy that was looking back and going, you idiots, you're doomed, but he was saying that a long time ago. And then he tried to take an action, which was, from his point of view, at least doing something about it as opposed to just watching and going off the edge of the cliff.
Last thing. I'm really intrigued about the location. Did you use any of the little props, the spoons or anything that you found? Did you end up using any of it? Really?
We used the hose to his actual water pipe. We used his veggie garden. So he had his irrigation system. We used the bike shed. We used like old tin cans of his, that he was eating out of. What else, Tone?
Clothing, the actual caves he was in, like you're saying, the root cellar. I mean, yeah, it's sort of, in a way it was an archaeological experience too, and amazing moments too of we were missing, we had a prop stove that I had found, but I was missing the little latch, the vent latch that creates the draft on the stove. And we were digging around ready to set the cabin on the old footings. We found that in the dirt, and it was and then brought it over to the stove and it fit exactly, So, there was moments like that would kind of happen, every day there was something, some artifact we would find that would make it into the film,
Or we'd meet people that knew him, and a lot of them ended up in the movie as well, because we worked with the locals in Montana, which was amazing.
What made me, after I watched this film, it made me watch the documentary series, because I'm like, you know, because I'm like, you know what, I kind of forgot about this a little bit. So I'm like, in order to interview you guys properly and to get, I'm like, so I watched the series to be like, man, you know, and you guys you crafted it was perfectly crafted, and I was totally into it, by the way. So nicely done.
Awesome, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando.
Great talking to you guys.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for being on FabTV.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.